Applejack had set up her stand in the center of town. Now that winter had been wrapped up for the year, she was happy to be back to growing and selling apples. Her first customer for the day was already here. "Howdy, Bonbon. What can I do for you?" "Do you for?" Applejack asked. "Oh, just the usual. I'll just take..." Bonbon looked over the bushels sitting around the apple cart. "A dozen should be fine." "Alrighty then." Applejack started inspecting some apples and started picking out the best ones to fill up a bag. "How have you been lately? Haven't seen you for a while." "I've been quite alright," Bonbon said. "It's just that, well, it took Lyra and I quite a while to finish all those apples, and then she was saying that if she ever saw another slice of apple pie, she'd probably be sick. And I have to admit that I was running out of recipes that could be made with apples." Applejack nodded. "Aunt Bloom won't be handling sales anymore." "It's for the best," Bonbon said solemnly. "Anyways, how's business at Sugar Cube Corner? Pinkie Pie ain't getting to you, I hope," Applejack said, smiling. "Pinkie's quite manageable. I'm sure you know my roommate. I'm used to occasional strangeness." Applejack helped load the apples in a Bonbon salad bag. "That reminds me. I just talked to Lyra this morning. Any idea what she's up to?" "She left early today. I thought she'd be playing another concert in the park." Bonbon tilted her head in confusion. "What did she talk to you about?" She just asked if she could borrow one of our carts for the day. I just can't imagine for what for, but we've got a few of them," Abject said. "I figured we could spare one." "One of your carts?" Bonbon said, frowning. "Why would she need one of those?" "No idea," Abject said with a shrug. "The gal is in a wreck. What is she up to?" Bonbon sighed. "But you know what they say about these artistic ponies. They can be a tad eccentric." "I'm sure it was nothing to be worried about," Abject said. "But anyhow, enjoy your apples, Bonbon." "Thank you," Bonbon said. There was a low rumble in the distance, followed by sounds of ponies screaming and gasping in shock. Applejack was squinting at something down the street and only had time to mutter, "What in tarnation?" And then something whooshed past, just a blur going through the streets of Ponyville with the speed of rival the Wonderbolts. "Hey, Bon!" God damn it. "Hey, Bon! I can't really do Lyra's voice right now for some reason." It was Lyra's voice, but quickly cut off by she soon passed. Bon didn't want to look at what she was just hurled through town, but she slowly turned around and stared down the street. There was an apple cart quickly fading into the distance. Abject's hat had blown off her head. She picked it up and shaken the dust off before putting it back on. Her eyes were wide in disbelief. That... What did she do now?" Bonbon said in a voice that was almost a whisper. "More importantly, what the hay is pulling that cart?" Abject said. Twilight nearly ran straight into them at full gallop and quickly skidded to a halt. She glanced at the two of them. "Hey, girls, do you have any idea what that was?" Her head turned to watch it, but just a brown dot in the distance. Suddenly Rainbow Dash had shown up as well, flying a few feet overhead. "Did you guys see that? Where'd it go? What was it?" she said, gaining some altitude, trying to see where it had gone. "I think it's my roommate," Bonbon said, her voice still quavered in shock. "What? How?" Rainbow Dash said, taking another glance down the street. "That was Lyra?" Twilight said. "I don't understand. What's she doing?" I think it's best if we stop talking and do something before some pony gets hurt," Abject said. Just gave a quick nod. "I'm on it." She was gone in a blur and chasing after the cart. She was accelerating as fast as she could as she flew down the street, but was still just barely catching up. There was a lot of distance to clear. Pumping her wings harder, she managed to match the speed of the vehicle and fly right alongside the driver. "Oh, hey, Rainbow Dash!" Lyra said, glancing over to her and then fixing her eyes back up front. She was sitting in front of the cart, her shirt flapping in the wind as they sped through town. "Lyra, what are you doing?" Dash watched her, frowning. The last few houses of Ponyville whisked past, and now we're heading out of town. Lyra's horn glowed for a moment, then just barely swerved around a tree, and then continued hurtling down the road. Rainbow Dash veered to the other side, then flew back alongside the cart. I'm experimenting. Well, it would take too long to explain, Lyra said. I don't think we have that much time. Rainbow Dash looked ahead and noticed the ravine they were headed for. Can't you stop it? Can't you stop it? She asked. It took me a while to get this thing up to speed. Braking is much harder. It turns out, Lyra said matter-of-factly, steering's nearly impossible. You're headed for a cliff. I've noticed. For seconds, with seconds to spare, Rainbow Dash grabbed Lyra with just her front hoof, lifting her off the cart with a jerk. She was only able to support her weight for a few seconds. The cart sped past under them, and then they both collapsed to the ground, trying to catch their breath. The cart zoomed over the edge and vanished into sight. From sight, there was a sound of smashing wood on the rocks below. There they are! It was Twilight's voice. Twilight and Applejack galloped over to them, and Bonbon followed close behind at a quick trot. Lyra, putting a hoof to the side of her head, was struggling to stand up straight. Her legs wobbled, and she leaned to one side and fell over completely. Lyra, what in Equestria are you doing? Bonbon demanded. With some effort, Lyra managed to pull herself up off the ground. She shook her head. I know it seems weird, but hear me out on this, Lyra said, raising a hoof. Oh, and Applejack, sorry about the cart. How? Applejack managed to force out. She was staring down into the canyon in disbelief. She could see a splintered remains of the cart, one wheel still spun around in its axle, sticking straight up into the air. Another rolled around on the ground and fell over. Lyra grinned sheepishly. Come-to-life spells are extremely advanced. You really shouldn't attempt them on something so large without proper practice. Even I can't quite manage to control them, Twilight said. I had a good reason for this, Lyra said. What exactly? Applejack said, raising an eyebrow. You see, Lyra took a deep breath, humans have carriages that move on their own. They actually don't look like these ones. They're made of something different. But I had to use the closest thing I could find. That's what this is about, Bonbon said. She put a hoof in her forehead in exasperation. Humans again! Lyra, I've read all the books. Humans aren't supposed to be able to do magic, and they could certainly never manage anything that advanced, Twilight said. Where would you even get that kind of idea? Lyra stated. Well, I dreamed it. Her voice was very quiet. All of this. It was all just a dream? Twilight's voice was flat. Well, yeah. I see humans in my dreams all the time. It doesn't always match what's in the books, but these things all make sense to me, Lyra insisted. You can hardly consider dreams to be a valid source of research, Twilight said. Especially when the very existence of humans is questionable at best. Just look at this. Logically, humans don't pull carts. They can tell that by looking at them. But what if they need to travel long distances? How would they get around? What if they had to transport some kind of large cargo, like furniture or something? Lyra said, her voice rising in intensity with each question. I guess that almost makes sense, but Twilight, don't tell me you believe her, Bonbon said. I really can't make any conclusions about humans with what little information we have, but I don't think that this can be included in our final report, Twilight said. She looked at the remains of the cart. Lyra even admitted that there's no record of anything like this. While this would have been beneficial to humans, it is far beyond what their abilities were said to be. Lyra stared at the ground. I've never been able to understand how things like that work either. That's why I needed to test it. If humans had really had something like that, wouldn't we still be using them? Twilight said. Probably. I don't know, Lyra said. Bonbon stared at Twilight. You said you don't think humans are real. Well, no, Twilight replied. But even consider the accepted mythology. This doesn't make any sense. Her eyes widened. That reminds me. I need to file out a report to the princess on my progress. Not that I've made much. Maybe we should go, too, Bonbon said, shooting Lyra a look. Lyra turned to Applejack. It's fine, I'll pay you back. It's fine, I'll pay you back. She hurried along after Bonbon without another word, glad to be away from that mess. Once they returned home, Bonbon turned to her roommate. Lyra, I know what I've been saying this before, that I've been saying this before, but I really mean it this time. All of this business about humans needs to stop, Bonbon said. I've put up with those hands. I didn't even say anything when you started wearing clothes, but this? You could have killed yourself out there. It was my first experiment with this technology. Mistakes happen, Lyra said. Your first? No, please, tell me you're not doing anything like that again. You completely destroyed Applejack's cart, all because of some theory that doesn't even make any sense. I know what I've seen, Lyra said. If you knew what my dreams were like, you would understand. If I figure out how humans worked these carriages, imagine how much quicker it would change. Humans aren't real! Bonbon yelled. Lyra shrank back, lowering her tone of voice. Bonbon continued. You're too old to believe in these stories. Just listen to Twilight, listen to your own parents, for Celestia's sake. None of them understand what's going on here. I know humans are real, Lyra said. But all of these things you've been doing. You're a unicorn. Nothing's going to change that. You're not a human. I never said I was. Bonbon took a deep breath. Lyra, I didn't want to have to say this, but if you keep doing these experiments or whatever it is you call them, She hesitated. I really don't want to have to force you to move out, but Lyra stared at her, completely taken aback. You'd seriously do that? Bonbon nodded slowly. But I'm worried about you, Lyra. I was willing to let it go and say it was harmless before, but this is just too much. You could have hurt somebody with that thing. There's nothing else to say. Fine. With a sigh, Lyra turned and headed to her room. Closing the door behind her, she collapsed on the bed and rolled over to stare at the ceiling. God damn it. It was so frustrating. All she needed was a solid piece of proof. Maybe all she had were only theories, separate pieces of evidence pointing to the fact that something had existed and created society before ponies had come along. But they seemed to close in her dreams. Seemed so close in her dreams. She looked over and saw her journal by the nightstand. The night before, she'd woken up again and had those images in her head. She flipped back to the last page and stared at what she'd drawn. She managed to get most of the details before she'd forgotten them. It really had very little in common with a wooden apple cart, but that was the closest thing she had. These human vehicles were made out of something else, possibly metal, based on the appearance. There were glass windows all around the sides. Passengers and drivers would sit inside, and the wheels were fatter and not made of wood. They'd been moving in a dream, and so she hadn't gotten a very good look at them. The real problem was propulsion. She'd been using magic, same as what powered anything in Equestria. The books all said that humans couldn't use magic, but how else would these carriages work? She'd seen them moving around at impossible speeds without anything pulling them. Twilight didn't believe in Lyra's dream, but she'd never experienced them. They weren't normal dreams. Everything was extraordinarily detailed. Lyra often saw things that were never described in the books, but there was no way she'd be able to imagine all these things on her own. And yet, Twilight did have a good point. If humans had built those things, what had happened to them? And why didn't ponies use them now? She set her journal down on the dresser on top of the cluttered mess of sheet music of the Grand Galloping Gala. That reminded her. She only had a week left. She picked up a copy of one of the waltzes and scanned the lines of music, hearing in her head as her eyes moved along the page. Fine. Maybe she'd give it a rest for a while, do some last-minute practicing for the gala, even though that was hardly necessary. Bonbon was upset, and any further research right now would just make that worse. Lyra was tired, and she just wanted some straight answers. But would she ever get them? Just anything that would make Bonbon see things her way. She turned out the lights and tried to tune out her thoughts and get some sleep. A cab had just pulled up in front of the house, and Bonbon was the first one to see it through the windows. Lyra, are you ready? Your carriage is here, she called. On my way. Response came from down the hall. Lyra did a quick sweep of her bedroom, gathering up everything she needed. There was sheet music, both loose and bound into books, scattered all throughout the room on her desk, nightstand, and bed. She used her magic to scoop it all up hastily. Everything in her dresser was piled onto a jumbled heap, which she compacted as much as she could, and she dashed out the door without another thought. Lyra was running as fast as she could in her dress, trying not to trip over the fabric. She was much more used to pants. This was too wide and hard to move in. She paused in the front room. "Good luck, Bonbon. Good luck out there," Bonbon said. "Do you think you'll be back tonight?" "Don't know," Lyra shrugged. "My parents sent a letter. They said they want me to visit after I'm done. She'll be late, but I'll try to make it back as soon as I can." She checked over all her things. Her lyre case, the books of sheet music, that should be it. They all floated along above her head as she trotted out the door. Lyra stepped out to the door of the carriage. She opened it and started setting down her things inside. Bonbon followed her outside and walked around to the front of the vehicle. "Everything all right?" The driver had noticed the expression of worry on Bonbon's face. "Oh, it's fine. Just wanted to make sure you were driving," Bonbon said. She got a quizzical look in response. It's a long story." She hung her head. "Don't worry about that, ma'am," the stallion replied. "I make the trip between Ponyville and Camelot all the time. Everything will be fine." "Yes, of course." Bonbon gave a short laugh. I'm sure it will be." Maybe she worried about Lyra too much. Her quirks had gotten more severe in the past few months. Without a doubt, but what was the worst thing that could happen at the Grand Galloping Gala? This would be nothing but a step in the right direction for Lyra. Perhaps she'd eventually find a permanent career with an orchestra and get some steady income. "All right, I'm ready," Lyra said, coming down from the side. She looked at Bonbon, then to the driver. "Let's get going." "Goodbye, Lyra," Bonbon said. "Do your best." "I'll see you tomorrow at latest," she pointed out for emphasis. "Bye." Lyra stepped up into the carriage. She sat on a cushioned bench inside, but her dress made it odd and uncomfortable to sit the usual way. She'd have to sit like a normal pony while she was performing anyway, just like Bonbon and Rarity had both told her. She watched as Bonbon and their house grew smaller and the carriage pulled away. Caroline was possibly an hour or so away. She settled back for the ride.